It's socially accepted that we go to college. It's the plan that everyone has, even though they don't know what they're going to do there. You take a loan so you can go to school.
Money, it's a gap. Grab that cash with both hands and make a stash.
You go to college, you'll get a job, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
That ain't true anymore. And millennials know that, and even those folks going into college can see it.
Let my honesty spill out through the pages.
You're listening to Escaping the Rat Race. I'm your host, Amy Leo, a singer, songwriter, and mental health educator. And our show is all about questioning the status quo and pushing the boundaries into what's possible for human beings and not probable. So tune in and get ready to escape the rat race, not only the monotonous 9-to-5 work grind, but also that incessant internal mental chatter that prevents most of us humans from experiencing more joy, peace, clarity, and freedom. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you are in the world today. My name is Amy Leo, and I'm very excited. I have to admit, maybe that's a little nerdy of me, but I think it's extremely practical because today's topic is all about student loans, demystifying student loans. So when I saw what Joshua Cohen was doing, I just had to have him on the show because one of the things I hear from people so often is, how can I possibly get ahead when all I have is this debt? And people lose a lot of sleep over this. It's a huge problem. So Joshua, if you could just take it away. First of all, I think that there isn't a lot of knowledge about this topic other than we wanted to go to college or get a higher education. We didn't have the money, so then we signed on the dotted line. So if you could kind of share a little bit more about, what is the biggest problem that you see in regards to student loans that people really don't know about?
Well, I think the biggest problem with student loans is people don't know what they don't know. And so they don't know what to look for. It's socially accepted that we go to college. It's the plan that everyone has, even though they don't know what they're going to do there. You take a loan so you can go to school. Things have really changed over the past decade. Back when I went to school, it was you were going to get federal loans, and that was really it. The idea of this private student loans, which is something I'll discuss, they really weren't that big back in the early 90s. But in the late 90s, they became more popular. In the 2000s, they almost became standard. And these days, when folks go to school, there's federal loans and private loans, and people don't know the difference, which is mistake number one. And they are incredibly different beasts, and the holes that you can get stuck in are also incredibly different. And that's really, I think, the first point is, what is the difference between these federal and these student loans? The fact that you're taking them out may or may not be a mistake, depending on which one and what you really know about them. So that's the first issue.
Well, that sounds like a great big place to get started. So can you tell us what is the difference? I mean, I know when I talk to some people, it's like, well, they think a loan is a loan. They don't understand terminology like interest rates or how that compounds. So please, let's get to the basics. And, what is the difference between the federal loan system, which was originally kind of implemented, to now what we see more often, which is the private loans as well?
Yep. So federal loans have been around since the 60s. And actually the Higher Education Act, which governs them, came out in 1965. Basically, what makes a federal loan is that it is in some way either originated by or guaranteed, which means insured in this case, by the federal government, by the Department of Education. Contrast that to a private loan. The federal government is never, ever, 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 ever involved, ever. And the federal government does not buy private loans. So if your loan ends up with the federal government, it was always a federal loan. So that's the first one. Private loans, because they have no federal backing, no federal interaction, the laws governing them are really no different than the laws governing a credit card or any other consumer debt that you would walk into a bank and get, like a private loan. The only difference, and this is kind of a big difference for some folk, is that it doesn't get discharged in bankruptcy the way a credit card does. In credit card, if you file a bankruptcy, the debt goes away at the end of the bankruptcy. With a private student loan, it's still there after the bankruptcy. That is the only difference between a private loan and a credit card. But in the grand scheme of things, a private student loan is more like a credit card and less like a federal student loan. The biggest difference and what people really care about is what happens if I screw up the loan. That's the difference, the biggest difference between a federal loan and a private loan. And hopefully, if you don't screw up, then the difference never makes a difference.
Right, right. Unfortunately, though, life does tend to happen, right? I'm sure you get that with your clients all the time.
That's it. Life.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So I have heard this too, that private loans, can't get discharged in bankruptcy. So what are some of the problems that your clients are coming across? So let's say in a perfect world, you'd pay back what you owe in a scheduled time frame and you'd pay as little interest as possible. I have a feeling that isn't what a lot of your clients are seeing in reality. So can you speak more to that, Joshua?
Sure. I can tell you that the majority of the people that come to me are in pain. It's the same reason why someone goes to a doctor. Something's wrong. Some people go to a doctor for preventative maintenance, and some people come to me for preventative maintenance. They see the cliff coming. They want to know how to avoid it. Unfortunately, most of the people that come to me have already fallen off the cliff, and they either want to know how they can climb back up or just what can they do. So that's the majority of people, and it's either getting them out of default, which you can do with the federal loan and you can't do with the private loan, or how do you get an affordable payment, or basically, what do? I have this monstrosity, which is what a student loan is. That's a lot of what I deal with is how do I stop the bleeding? How do I stop a wage garnishment? How do I stop them from taking my Social Security? How do I get my tax refund back that they've already taken? Those are the big questions that come through the door most often. And believe it or not, the answer is usually pretty much the same. If it's a private loan, it's one set of deals. If it's a federal loan, there's other actions that we take. And that, again, is the biggest difference between a federal loan and a private loan. With the private loan, they got to sue you first. If they don't sue you, there isn't really much they can do. They can only do what a state law allows them to do. So it varies by state. But federal loans, you've probably heard the tragedies. They can garnish wages without a lawsuit. They can take a portion of Social Security. They can take federal tax refunds, which, hey, we're in tax refund season, so be careful what you do.
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, yes, the government can sue you. I have defended a few of these. So it's while it looks worse, we haven't talked about the upside yet, which is all of this is workable with federal loans.
Okay. I was really struck by the fact you said Social Security check. I actually have a lot of clients I've worked with over my own career that are of Social Security age. Are you finding this to happen more and more, Joshua, that older Americans are having debt still?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Because here's one of the issues. One of the federal loans out there is called a Parent Plus loan, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a loan for the parent. And one of the myths I hear out there is, I'll take the loan and then I'll just reassign it to my child. And my response is, you can't. There is no way to take a plus loan and reassign it to your child. Your child, if they're making money and doing well, could refinance by taking out their own loan and paying off their parents' loan. But you can't just simply reassign it. It's not like a car that you can sell. And so you have parents that took out the loans when they were a parent at age 40, 50, or 60, and they retire, and hey, they still have the loan. If they don't keep it on track, and we can talk about how you can do that, it's actually quite easy. If they don't keep it on track and it defaults, then yes, they can lose up to 15% of their Social Security. Worse, it's not just the elderly that have this problem, because they're allowed to touch Social Security disability. So if you've got a 35-year-old that's collecting Social Security disability and doesn't keep track of their own loans, then they can lose 15% of their check.
Wow.
So they get you coming and going.
Yeah, I'm getting that theme, and that's something I hear from my own listeners quite a bit. Wow, which is why we invited you on the show. I have a feeling, like you said, it's not all doom and gloom. So please share with us, how can people keep this stuff kind of on track? I know for me personally, Joshua, I'll be honest, there are so many options with the repayment plans. I mean, do you find that some of these are really much worse, or is it case by case basis, or is it like a blanket, some are better than others? What's been your experience with that?
I mean, I can say that federal loans, okay, I've been doing this for 8 years now. So when I say from my viewpoint, I'm talking about 8 years worth of doing nothing but helping borrowers with their student loan issues. In fact, my law practice has done nothing but student loan issues for the past 3 or 4 years. I don't accept anything unless it's a student loan issue, which tells you how big a problem this is.
Yeah.
The fact that my law firm can exist on just student loan issues. Anyway, from where I sit, federal loans are hands down better than private loans because of the good things, and that the best thing that I talk about are repayment plans. There are 9 different repayment plans out there for federal loans. 4 of them are based on the balance of the loan. The other 5 are based on the borrower's income and family size, which means if you can't afford your loan, you probably can with these income plans. Now, all of them range, they look at your adjusted gross income, which means they're looking at taxable income, number one. And 2, they look at your family size. So let's back up a step. We were just talking about Social Security intercepts and how it affects disabled and elderly. They're looking at adjusted gross income, earned income, taxable income. Social Security income isn't always taxable, which means even if you're bringing it in, if it doesn't show up on your taxes, it doesn't affect your payment, and it is quite possible to have a payment as low as 0, which means you can't miss a payment. And even if your payment is $5, that's quite affordable for most everybody. So how do you stay on track? How do you stop a Social Security intercept, or how do you avoid it? If you get on these plans, they're called income-driven repayment, IDR, and there are 5 subsets. You get on that plan based on your income or lack thereof, and if your payment is 0, well, then you can't miss a payment. The problem becomes, or the difficulty for many people is remembering you have to recertify your income and family size every 12 months. As long as you do that, you can stay on a $0 payment. So that 35-year-old disabled person that I spoke about before, they could start at age 35 on an income-based plan of 0 or $5 or $10 a month, and then you get to the end of the payment plan, the light at the end of the tunnel, you only have a payment term of 20 to 25 years depending on which plan you pick, which means if you start at age 35 and you go for 25 years, I'm doing math on air, is age 60. At age 60, you're done with the loan for this particular person. Now, there's a caveat here. Right now, you're taxed on what they forgive, but you've kicked the can down the road 25 years. You've survived 25 years. We don't know if Congress might wake up. We've got 4 more presidents before the first rounds of these forgivenesses begin, because the bulk of them won't start until 2034. So we have no idea how it's really going to work. But you survived. The name of the game is survival. The name of the game is not how do I pay off my loan, because we all know you're not going to. You just can't. And unlike a house which you can return to the bank, as much as people want to return the education, they don't want your brain sitting on their desk. You can't do that. You know, I've had some clients say, can I get a lobotomy? What can I do? You can't, obviously. And until bankruptcy laws loosen up, which I don't foresee coming anytime soon, we're stuck in a survival mode. We play the game, and we play that game by taking advantage of income-driven repayment. And it's not just lower income folk that benefit. I have quite a few middle class that this is their perfect plan. It's not beautiful. It's not going to pay off the loan, but they will survive. They can buy a house. They can have a car. They can raise kids. They can get married. They can live.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
That's so interesting. You really addressed what my question was going to be. It was going to be something along the lines of, that sounds great, and as someone that has just graduated, we have all these ideas of our career path, but again, like we talked about before the show today, life sometimes happens. So again, if you do end up on disability, or that 7-figure job doesn't come into fruition within 20 years, my concern was, oh my gosh, think of all the interest they're accumulating. But you're talking about this forgiveness program
Yes.
that may be in place, but then again, we don't know yet how it will hit in reality. But it is good that at least that's how it is for right now. That's all we can act from. Yeah.
And the other advantage of these plans is they're great for retirement planning. Because I have quite a few people that come to me at age 40 or 50. Okay, they're 52 and they're planning for retirement in 15 years, but the terminal loan is 25. What are they going to do for those final 10 years? They don't want to keep working. The income-driven payment plans are perfect because it always adjusts to your income. When you make more money, the payment goes up. When you make less money, the payment goes down. If you become unemployed, do the math. What do you think your payment's going to be when you're unemployed? It's zero, which means you should never have a problem if you know how to do this. And doing it is easy. You call your servicer, you demand income-driven repayment. They'll send you the form, or you can do it online if you have an account with them, and that's it. I exist because the servicers can't seem to get it right, but people don't and shouldn't need me. I'm available for second opinions. That's really what I'm good for. This is what I was told. Tell me the truth. I'll tell you the truth, then we can decide how to go with it. That's what I do.
Yeah, and it sounds like a fantastic service because it is individualized. We can only talk general for the show, of course, but I'm sure there are always individual and specific needs that a person may need that another one, of course, doesn't.
Yes.
Doesn't need. My gosh. How are we hanging in, listeners? No, this is great. This is great stuff. I am also curious, as we talked about loans and credit cards, I do find among some listeners and even some friends of mine is that they really don't understand how these products work, how these debt products work, meaning they really don't understand interest. Can you talk to, what exactly interest is and what like APR means on their credit card statement?
Sure.
Thanks.
I mean, in general, interest is the cost of borrowing money. If I'm going to invest and loan you $10,000, I want to make money back. The only way to get an interest-free loan is to get it from a friend. Because they're your friend. They don't want to make money off of you. I got news for you. Friends would like to make money off of you too if they could. They just know you better, so they're happy if they can get anything back. So interest is the cost of borrowing money. APR, annual percentage rate, is actually different than the APY, annual percentage yield, and this is something to pay attention to. The annual percentage rate is the rate that they charge you for the interest that they show you up front. But APY, which is something many people don't know about, annual percentage yield, is what is the overall interest that they're going to charge you, because there are other fees in there usually, whether it's the origination fee or some transaction fees or something like that. At the end of the day, when it comes to student loans, again, from my experience over 8 years, interest is a red herring. It is so immaterial in the student loan context because, and I hate saying this, and I'm a little biased because of the audience that I see. I don't see people that aren't in trouble because it's, again, like a doctor. If you're not really that sick, you don't go to a doctor. And if you don't crash your car, you don't bring your car to an auto body shop. So I'm kind of like what happens after the crash. So interest rate matters if you're going to pay off the loan. Now, I know there are people raging out there saying, well, why would you take a loan if you don't plan on paying it back? You know what? We all plan on paying it back. No one takes a loan with the thought that they're not going to. That's fraud. That's illegal.
Right.
What I mean is in the context of student loans when, you start and you think, okay, I'll go to college, I'll get a job, and you come out of undergrad with $30,000, no big deal, that's the same price as a car. And then you go to grad school and you have now $130,000 and you realize, wow, I'm still not working, or I'm not working up to my capacity, or my field doesn't pay that well, like social workers,
Hey,
where
that's my history. Yes, social work. Yes,
you,
Joshua, speak.
I mean, seriously, you need a master's to be a social worker, which means you've got easily 130, 150, 200,000 in debt. Yet social workers don't make a lot, 50, 60, depending on where you live. So we already know it's going to have a hard time paying it back unless you marry rich, which is nice, but you can't plan for that. Um, so my point here is, okay, now that you've got the loans, how does the interest rate figure into it? On a federal loan, if you're going to pay it off, if you choose one of those balance-based plans, then it figures in like a regular amortization, like on a car. Your car payment changes if you have 4% interest versus 12%. We all have seen that because you're going to pay it off. But if you're on an income-driven payment plan, it's very likely that your payment is actually less than interest. It's what we call negative amortizing. The loan gets bigger. And think about it. If your payment is $0 a month, you're obviously not even touching the interest, so your loan grows. It's legal because the Department of Education allows it, because it's the only way to survive, and massive default doesn't make sense. Interest rate does matter on your private loan because that's like a car. It's like a mortgage. It's what is your payment going to be? Because your payment has to be principal plus interest. The problem is with a lot of these interest rates are based on how good is your credit and how good is your job. Now, some people should realize there's a problem there. How good is your job when you're taking a student loan? You're taking a student loan because you're going to school, which means you probably don't have a job. So how good is your credit rating? And that's the problem. And then, now here's the real evil of this private student loans. Hey, student, your credit isn't that great because you don't have a job. Duh. So let's get mom involved, or dad, or grandma, or uncle, or roommate, or somebody else to co-sign so we can go after them when you go to school and then get out and still can't get a job.
Exactly.
Or even if you get a job, you get married and now you can't afford the loan. Now we're going to go after your co-signer. And that's the real evil of private loans, is they hook the older generation because as parents, we feel an obligation to help our children get through and get better at life. And then we go to retire, but we have a private loan. Private loans have two payment options: pay or don't pay. How do you like those options?
Yeah.
It's, some of them say, oh, no, we offer forbearance. Okay, a forbearance is a temporary postponement of payment until things get better. But what if things aren't going to get better? You're doing life and you're doing okay, but you can't afford the loan. A postponement of payment for 12 months does nothing. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a stab wound.
Right.
It's enough to get you to the hospital, but you better get to the hospital. The other thing that they offer is they'll offer you to lower the interest rate down to 1% or even 0.5%. That's great. What they don't tell you is they don't do it until you're 90 or 120 days late. If you're that late, you've technically defaulted on the loan. So you can accept their 0.5% interest, but they can turn around and sue you at any time.
Oh.
Because you've defaulted. They don't tell you. Why would they tell you this?
Yeah, right. Right.
God forbid we're honest with you.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the real motivation here for private loans and why people pay, it's not just their moral obligation that they want to pay. I understand that. People want to pay their debts because they care about their credit score. If they realize they're in default and they make payments on a defaulted loan don't affect your credit score because they don't report the payment. So if you realize making payments doesn't affect your credit score and they can still sue you tomorrow, why pay? And I'm not saying that as a lawyer saying, why are you paying your debt? It's the realization that many people have on the phone with them when I tell them this.
Mm.
They ask me, why am I paying my debt if it doesn't help my credit and they can still sue me tomorrow? And my response is, I don't know.
Mm.
Now, again, many people have this moral obligation. And what I like to tell people is, look, I'm a lawyer, not a rabbi, not a priest. I can't speak to the moral obligation. I can speak to the legal obligation. And you know what? I've never in my 8 years had someone come into me and say, I don't want to pay this debt. Tell me how to get out of it.
Right.
What I have is, I can't afford this debt. What can I do? They won't work with me. It's very similar to what people did when the foreclosure crash happened. I want my house. I want to pay my house, but I want to pay something that's affordable so I can stay in it. And what did the bank say? Too bad.
Too bad. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's happening with the private loans too. And unfortunately, the private lenders don't have to work with people. There's no law out there that says we have to offer you an income-based plan. There's nothing out there that says we have to discharge your loan because you're in a wheelchair. There's nothing. It's a private loan. The difference is they can't come and take your education back. So it's harder to deal with. It's harder to figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, private loans are this double-edged sword. On one hand, they don't have to offer you anything, but on the other hand, there's nothing they can do unless they sue and win. And that's different in every single state. So that's as much information as I can give. You can see why federal loans are so much more friendly.
Yes, certainly. And how would, again, let's just say it's a new person to this conversation and they're thinking about going to school, they want to go to school. How does someone differentiate between if something is a federal loan or a private loan?
Okay, so when applying for schools and applying for financial aid, schools are supposed to offer federal loans first. So the first red flag is if they say, one, you can't have a federal loan, or two, we don't offer federal loans. If they don't offer federal loans, there might be a problem with their accreditation. So that's flag number one.
Okay.
If they say you can't have federal loans, then you need to find out why. Is it because your parents make too much money, which is subjective? Every school has their own formula. Or is it because we really don't offer it, but we don't want to tell you that, but you can nail them down on that. So if it's because parents on paper make a lot of money, then there's nothing you can do except look at another school. So that's the first one. Second one is when they give you their award, the financial aid award, they'll have scholarships and grants, which you always want because those you don't pay back. It's free money. It sounds weird, but it is. They'll offer work study at many places. And work study is money set aside for you to get a job on campus so that you have money to survive. Well, yeah, it's survival money. It's for textbooks because textbooks aren't paid with your loans directly to the school. It's any other living costs that you have that don't get paid directly to the school. Travel expenses, things like that, and survival. Some people joke and say, oh, it's keggers season. No, I don't want to go there. But I will say everybody knows when they get their financial aid, when they get their student loan refunds, the money that comes back to them, because those are always the best parties that weekend. We know that. But so you look at the financial aid award, and after scholarships, grants, and work study are the loans. And federal loans will always come first. And you can tell they're federal because you're looking for Stafford loans,
Okay.
Perkins loans. They might offer Parent Plus loans for parents of undergraduates. If you're a graduate student, they can offer a Graduate Plus loan. And then somewhere on there, they'll put either alternative loan or private loan. And you can always, don't be afraid, call up financial aid and say, what kind of loan is this? Is it federal or private? Financial aid is not going to beat around the bush on it. They'll tell you straightforward, this is federal, this is private. They have to, because the federal loans you get through financial aid, they give you the application. And actually a lot of this is done online now through FAFSA, FAFSA.gov. You sign your notes online. The money goes directly to the school. Private loans are very different. The check comes to you, the student, and we hope you send it to the school to pay for stuff. So you can tell from the award. The next step is, if you don't get enough, call financial aid and say, hey, do you have any more? They may or may not. Federal loans are capped. Parent Plus loans are capped in the sense they're made to fill in what's left over. But what you're asking financial aid for is, look, if your school really wants me as a student, you need to find more money, whether it's scholarships or grants from endowment, whatever it is. You need to find a way for me to afford it. And don't tell me to go get a private loan, because if you've heard anything I've said, private loan's bad. Let me take a step back from that. Private loans aren't bad, but understand it's like, for parents, it's like buying a car. You might co-sign a car for your child, but what kind of car? Would you co-sign a $20,000 car? Probably. Would you co-sign a $50,000 car? Probably not. So realize what you're doing. If it's $10,000 needed the first year, how much are you going to need year 2, 3, and 4? And that's just undergrad. Whatever they give you for a private loan amount, multiply it by 4, and then deal with the sticker shock and think, do you want it or not? What do you do if you don't want it? Okay, like I said, step 1, call the school and say, look, I need more endowment, I need more grants. Step 2, look at another school. This is very different than when I went to school. I went to school in the early 90s, and we still had the idea of, you go to college, you'll get a job, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
That ain't true anymore, and millennials know that, and even those folks going into college can see it. So now it's kind of like, I don't want to say bargain shopping, but you have to compare colleges. And is a brand name college going to make a difference? For some career paths, it does. For other career paths, it doesn't. And we used to say, go to school. It's okay if you don't know what you want to do. Freshman, sophomore year, you take a little of this, a little of that. It's a smorgasbord. You'll figure out what you like. That's an expensive proposition at a 4-year school now.
Yes, it is.
There's nothing wrong with community college, because community college, as long as you do well enough, you get transferred right into a state school. State schools are cheaper. Everybody wins. So you take community college, you try some of this, some of that, you find what you like. If you don't find anything, guess what? Maybe college isn't for you. That's the other part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Does everyone belong in college? No.
Yes.
Now,
thank you for saying that. Yes.
Well, but it's the truth.
It's true.
And
it's true.
it's oh God, I'm forgetting his name. Dirty Jobs. I can't remember his name now. But there are a lot of careers out there where college isn't even required. A lot of look, if you want to be an electrician or a welder or a plumber, the only thing you need college for is to learn how to run a business, if you're going to run a business. If you're going to work for someone else, you may not even need that. And those courses you can get in community college, and many states are moving to a free or greatly reduced fee community college. So go to community college and learn some basics, accounting and business running and stuff like that. And then you can go to welding school or electronic school or whatever it is. It's not full-blown college, but you've got a path. Mechanics. I don't know anybody that I went to college with that knows how to fix a car because of college. You go to auto mechanic school, it's different. So, think about what you like to do, and there's nothing wrong with that path, because we will always need mechanics, we will always need electricians, and we will always need plumbers because of all the crap we deal with. I mean,
true.
And there's a nice part about those jobs is you can pick up and move wherever you want in the U.S. We're going to need you. Those jobs will never go out of style as compared to a tech job. Tech jobs, technology is increasing at such a rate that, the courses I took in college on technology are obsolete. Programming in binary code, what?
Yeah.
Even C+, you don't need it. It's so... Yeah, you need college for it to stay up to date, but it's a different view. And so there's nothing wrong with community college. Oh, I don't want to live with mom and dad. That's a different issue. I can't address that. Or sometimes mom and dad say, just get them out of the house. There are ways to work on that. But, you've got to look at the bottom line. You have to look at the sticker. And then what I do know So talking through this, what is the cost? How do you know what your bill is going to be when you're just a freshman or you're a senior in high school looking at this? Because they only offer you aid for the first year. They don't know what's going to happen year 2, 3, 4. You
Mhm.
can assume it's going to be the same. You can multiply it by 4 and go, oh, wow, that's a lot of loan. But they don't show you what the repayment's going to be because they're not obligated to.
I know that. I really hope that that gets changed myself,
Well,
Joshua.
so here's what you can do. One, you can just take the numbers and Google an amortization calculator, and that will tell you what it'll be if you do a 10-year term or a 25-year term. Those are terms that the Department of Ed will give you. Or you can go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website, cfpb.gov, and they have a tab for student loans, and on there they have a calculator to help you figure out what is your student loan payment going to be when you get out. And that, now we can bring it back to what people are used to. It's just like going into a car dealership. Nobody looks at the sticker price of a car. What they care about is, what is my monthly payment? Can I afford it?
Mhm.
Which is why people are driving cars they probably shouldn't, because when they bought it, they could afford it. They
Yeah.
didn't know what was going on. But that's a great way. You can go to the cfpb.gov and get an idea. What is your student loan payment going to be? Because if your student loan payment is $500 a month, ask yourself, can I afford $500 a month? As a teacher, as an artist, as a philosopher,
Yeah.
we need all of those degrees, but you can look at the underlying debt. Maybe 2 years of community college could cut that in half, and $250 a month seems much more affordable. So, um, so when you ask, I'm going to go to college, what should I look for? Is it okay with loans? I don't have a problem with federal loans because right now we have income-driven repayment. It will always be affordable. During those few months after college, or even years, if you can't land a job, or you're working retail, or you're a barista, you can get a payment that's based on your income. And since it's based on family size, you can get married, you can have kids. Your payment should always be affordable. Private loans, you don't have that flexibility. That's why you must be careful with them. If you need a private loan for 5,000, fine, that's not a big deal. 10,000, okay. But you got to know what your limit is. In many ways, this is like playing a table in Vegas. How big a pot do you want to play with before you realize I better walk away?
It's so funny. I had that experience in my own life, Joshua, where I was halfway through a master's program, and I started to realize that all this debt was accumulating. And then also realizing, again, I really appreciate what you've highlighted about taking the time as an individual to step back for a second and question, if, question the status quo, to question, is this right for you? And I did that. And Joshua, I was shocked. I was in my early 20s. I was shocked at what the repayment was. And that was only for half of the degree. I said, oh my gosh, thank goodness I didn't kind of continue down that route. So I really appreciate the neutrality, you're bringing to the conversation.
I do want to bring one other thing in there, and this is not to make you feel bad about your choice, because it's not. There is something we should also bring up when we talk about federal loans. Is many people are aware of this, but let's talk about it. It's public service loan forgiveness.
Mm.
That's been in the news lately because this year is the first year that people will actually receive a forgiveness under that plan. It won't be many, but there will be a few. Public service loan forgiveness is a great thing for federal loans because it's basically anybody that is a government worker, or if you work for a nonprofit, a 501c3, or a few um, uh, nonprofit like education or public service type organizations. They may not be true 501c3s, but their main focus is education and public service. So some of those folks will also get it. But if you work for these kinds of organizations, government or nonprofit, and you're on one of these income-based plans, because if you work for the government, you may not make that much money, and you have the right kind of loan, a direct loan directly from Department of Education, you only pay for 10 years. And any balance you have after 10 years is forgiven tax-free,
Mm.
which is perfect for social workers because they owe 150 but only make 50 a year. So they're on a payment plan they can afford, and after doing it for 10 years, if they can make it that long, because there's a high rate of burnout, if they make it that long, their loan is forgiven. That's the thank you for doing that job. Government employees, you stay in for 10 years. After 10 years, it's done. Legal aid workers, 10 years, done. Nurses and even doctors can qualify for this plan. 10 years, you're done. Military, they get this benefit. So, and this is great for teachers. You take a look at many teachers, for instance, in Connecticut, where I used to live, you have to have a master's in order to be a teacher, which means you're in $150,000 in debt, and you might make $60,000 a year.
Right.
So after 10 years of teaching, their loan is forgiven. Done. And that's something for people to look at. It invites people to take those jobs that haven't always had the best reputation, or people don't really see the value of it, or they're just they know that it doesn't pay enough to pay off the loan. That's the purpose of public service loan forgiveness. There is no program like that for private loans. Another big difference between them.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. I actually was going to ask you about some of these programs as well that I've heard about. And also, is this related to, or is it a separate program? I've also read about something that if you provide services in an underserved area as well, there's deals that they do loan forgiveness. Is it all under that hat that you've already talked about?
A little bit, and that covers people that work for a company that's not necessarily government or nonprofit, but if they deal specifically with underserved in an education capacity or a public service capacity, then yes, they might. And what I tell people is go to the Department of Education's website and do a little bit more research on it.
Yeah.
Because I can't speak on a one-on-one basis to it. But something else that'll help verify is the Department of Education has what's called an employer certification form. You can send that in, and they'll send it back saying, yes, your payments are counting, or no, your employment doesn't qualify.
Oh, that's easy then. Yeah.
Okay. It is.
Okay.
Now, I will tell people, don't always go off of that. You might want a second opinion, whether it's from me or someone else, or directly to the Department of Education. But for the most part, they're pretty good. Again, if government workers qualify, 501c3 qualify. You got to be a full-time worker, though, not a volunteer. If it was volunteering, we'd all be doing it, and we'd be doing much better.
Yeah, and maybe our communities would be doing better too. I don't know. Maybe this is an idea, Joshua. Well, great. Well, we're running a little short on time. I've got a couple more questions about just the logistics of loans that I've actually heard from people. I actually went around the community asking people if they had questions for this specific show.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of go into, how you think we can kind of basically get at the root of this problem. It seems like what we're doing now is dealing with kind of what we've got, which is the effects. And I'd love to hear your take on the roots, and how we can start to transform that. But first, we do deal with this right now. So let me just ask a couple of questions that I've got. I got one gal that she keeps getting all these offers to consolidate her loan. Is that something that you would generally recommend or would not recommend, or is it kind of neutral?
When I hear solicitations for consolidation, that means they don't even know who you are, what's your loan situation, or how they're really going to benefit you. Honestly, my word for them is scam.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what the consolidation companies do. They consolidate your federal loans, and they put you on an income-driven payment. You don't need necessarily to consolidate your loans to have an income payment, number one. Number two, you don't need to pay anybody, including me, to consolidate your loans and or get on an income-driven repayment. All of that is available on the Department of Education's website and through your servicer. You should be able to call your servicer and say, hey, can I get a lower payment through IDR, through income-driven repayment? And they're supposed to run the numbers for you. So the consolidation companies don't do anything except charge you.
Gotcha.
The worst part about consolidation companies is they can't speak to you about particular advice. They can't tell you pros and cons and goods and bads of doing everything. That's the problem I have with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm so glad I asked that. And then one thing that I've seen as well in my own loans, so I'll be, really transparent here, is that it does seem that the interest gets accumulated and then it's added to the principal in some of the loans. Is that, can they do that on federal and private loans, or is this something, yeah, how do you see this going
It's
on?
called it's called capitalization. Private loans can do it if it's in the promissory note. So
Okay,
read the note. And if
gotcha.
you're concerned, there are plenty of consumer attorneys around the U.S. that are happy to help you read the note. Because if they find a violation, they may take your case. That's number one. For federal loans, capitalization is the name of the game. It's
Okay.
there. It happens, okay, interest is converted into principal at particular times. One, anytime you have a forbearance or deferment, at the end of that, all of the interest turns into principal. So we've all had an in-school deferment while we're in school. When
Right.
we graduate, all that interest that accumulated turned into principal. So boom, it happens to everybody, number one. It also happens when we default. If we miss 9 payments, all the interest that accumulated during those 9 payments racks up into principal. So that capitalization is legal and it happens all the time. But it's a red herring again.
Hmm.
Because if you're on an income driven plan and you'll never pay it anyway,
Right.
there's.
Right.
So
Yeah,
keep
exactly.
your eye on the ball.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. My little 18-year-old self didn't question the status quo as much and wasn't as knowledgeable about this, but that's okay. This is why we're creating this platform today. Okay, well, that really kind of sums up the questions I had to ask. And if you want to get a little philosophical with me, Joshua, how can we, as a society, begin to really chop this off? Pull it up by the roots. Because one thing that's interesting, I've traveled quite a bit. I'm living in Amsterdam, Netherlands now, and a lot of my European friends have a completely different educational structure. For instance, my fiance is Finnish and his education pays for nothing. Now, granted, his country is much smaller in population, but I'm just curious if you personally think that there is definitely room for improvement and some creative solutions for our own country when it comes to this, because it does sound like a huge problem, or else again, you wouldn't be in this business.
The problem is, first of all, we have politics, and politics always goes into it. You have very conservatives, you have very liberal, and it's a question of what they see is deserved versus what is fair and what should be earned. So, we had one platform running of free college, and we had another platform that says we should privatize the whole thing and take federal loans out of it, and maybe even privatize education altogether. I'm not going to venture opinion on either one because I think they both have too many problems practically to
Hmm.
work. Is the money there to afford, uh, free college? Yes, but that doesn't mean it would work. And so I don't want to dissect either one of them. From where I sit, I think a lot of this comes down to transparency.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, when we look at a school, I would love for that school to say, here's what it costs for all 4 years. I don't care about 1 year because I'm not going to be there 1 year. I'm going to be there 4. So tell me what the trend has been. Show me what it cost 4 years ago so that I can watch your trend. It's going up and up, or is it leveling? What's going on? Um, and that's with all schools, private and whether it's a private 4 year or a for profit, which we all know they have problems, or even a state school. Look at the trends so you can figure it out. And then we need to better educate people about how loans work, which I think I've covered some of it, but people need to sit down and stop just signing on the dotted line because I'll be okay. Because if your goal is to be a rock star, why are you in college? What are you going to get out of it? Is it because you want to learn how to manage bands and you want a business degree? Okay, fine. You've got something to fall back on because you might be really good at guitar, but if you can't book a gig, you're going to need a desk job. I think a lot of it is better counseling or more counseling during high school so that kids have realistic goals of what do they really want to do. You know, the kid that's afraid of blood is not going to medical school. They're
Right.
just not. And I know that because that was me, much to my father's great disappointment. Um, but it's research, where is it that you want to go, and a lot of this comes down to parents and kids and guidance counselors and the colleges. Here's what you can learn at our school. Here's what you can't.
Mm.
Our school is known for this department. We're not known in this department. Here's what we can help you with. If you want to be a lawyer, and I'll take the lawyer joke out of it. If you want to be a lawyer, how much does where you go to undergrad matter? It might matter. It might not. Do you know what they call the kid that graduates last in their class from law school? A
No.
lawyer.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
so that's really the question: is how much is it going to affect where you go? Is it going to affect what you get for salary? Maybe. If you're the cream of the crop, you're going to do well. If you're at the bottom of the barrel, you may not do well. And then the question is, are you okay working for yourself, or do you have to work for somebody else? What is it that you enjoy doing that you could really do for a living and be happy with? That's part of it, is really starting to target high school seniors, young adults, and get them vested in their future. That's the other problem. Are they really vested in their future? Do they have a goal of what they want to do, or are they cruising through life? If they want to be a video game designer, is that really practical? How hard is it to be a video game designer, or how easy is it? That kind of stuff. That's number one. As for our actual system, I think private loans need to be dischargeable in bankruptcy again, because there's no risk for the private company. And my question is, why? Why are we protecting a private company in bankruptcy? We don't do that on anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
The federal government, that's a harder argument. It's our tax dollars at work. But a private company that has no risk, that's why the underwriting is almost non-existent from what I see. Sure, we'll let grandma be a cosigner. Grandma's retired. She can't pay the loan, but we're going to put her as a cosigner? Why?
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff. So I think bankruptcy reform, and I think there does need to be reform in the federal system. I think Parent Plus loans can be huge. I think from where I sit, a cap might help. Even Graduate Plus loans, a cap might help so that you can only get in so deep. I think if you put limits on things, then college costs have to come down because you lose a big bunch of people that can't afford it. There's the counter argument that, well, the wealthy can always afford it and lower income can't, so you need to make sure they can. That's part of the delicate balance in the argument. Is, are we denying people college if we cap loans, or are we helping bring the price down, which means more people can afford it? It's a big mess. It's really hard to take apart. And I'm not an economist. I think that's part of the other issue is we don't have any economists really sitting down and looking at this. And then the people that are policy makers, our decision makers, they don't seem to look at data and actually use it. Okay, so we have people that have data, and then you have to use that data so you get the outcome that you want, not the other way around. Here's the outcome we want, and we're going to make the data fit. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to see bankruptcy reform. I think that would be a big first step. And I think, it really comes down to individuals sitting down and really, really thinking about what do they want to do and what's the best way to get there, because college may not be it. And that's okay. I think society also needs to accept that, okay, you don't have a bachelor's, but you can fix my car really well, and that's all I care about. There's nothing wrong with not going to college. Society needs, and actually it's Americans that need to accept that, because the system in Europe is different and it works for that.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Fantastic, fantastic. So we have been speaking today on escaping the rat race with student loan lawyer Joshua Cohen. And please, I'm going to post everything that you had said resource-wise in the show notes, but can you also share where people can find you to reach out to you directly?
Sure. My website is www.thestudentloanlawyer.com. And as I've said, I help people with student loan issues. I do have some limits, but people are welcome to visit and launch me a question or book an appointment. And if it's something that I can't help with for whatever reason, I'll say why. And I've got many other resources. I've got attorneys in lots of other states that I'm happy to ship you off to. So I can pretty much find a resource for anybody, whatever the issue is.
Okay, and it's about that time for Kelly. Cue the drum roll, please. Amy's Real Stories. So every week on the show, we share A story that really questions the status quo and that really points to the possibilities of being human versus the probabilities. Today's real story is this. Former New Jersey born dancer, fitness instructor, and bartender with tens of thousands of dollars in debt goes on to build an 8-figure business. Again, former New Jersey born dancer, fitness instructor, and bartender with tens of thousands of dollars in debt goes on to build an 8-figure business. The gal's name is Marie Forleo, and as her signature tagline goes, she has built a business and a life that she loves. Her years of continual education and her ability to be herself has really led to a thriving brand and business that helps thousands upon thousands of business owners every year through her signature program, B School. And one of her self-professed life mottos is that everything is figure-outable. That's actually an idea that we support strongly on this show by highlighting the neuroscience and what it takes to creatively solve problems as they arise. So she's not an overnight success story. She's been working over a decade to get from A to Z. But what I enjoy so much about this story is it shows the potential of a human being who's willing to learn and adapt as they go, who's willing to get their hands dirty and have those embarrassing moments and make those mistakes, but how, again, that open-minded, receptive, and reflective nature that we all have access to can really serve us on whatever our goal is, whether it is building a business such as this. If you want to make it brainless and painless and get these episodes delivered right to your inbox, all you've got to do is subscribe. What you're going to do is you type into your search engine, either on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher, Escaping the Rat Race with Amy Leo. Click subscribe, and you will be sure not to miss any of the amazing guest speakers that we've previously featured and all of the rock stars that are on our guest list for the spring and summer. Next week, we're going to be interviewing Gina Ryan, for example, from the Anxiety Coaches podcast, who's going to take us into a deep dive about mindset, mental health, and really the potential to not only survive with anxiety, but to thrive in the midst of anxiety. Until next time, keep rocking.